the same time, an incredible expectation on government. The Human Settlements Minister, Mmamoloko Kubayi, is saying that funds have been allocated to help rebuild the houses of families affected by the floods. Kubayi saying that government will be doing its best to ensure that those funds are not misused. Well, joining us in studio, Chrissy Dube, who is with Good Governance South Africa. Chrissy, good afternoon. Thank you for your time. I think when you hear politicians say we're going to try and make sure that these funds are not looted effectively, many South Africans will roll their eyes to a statement like that, because that's what was said about the COVID-19 funds, and yet we have a reality of what happened, what needs to be in place to ensure that this does not happen again.
Thank you for having me. I think that it's very important that there be a successful implementation of the funds and monitoring and evaluation of that. It's important that when the funds are dispatched, they are accounted for, and that everything that the funds are meant to be used for are used accordingly. And this can only be done if there's effective monitoring and evaluation, and not just a dispatch of funds and then expecting a report thereafter.
Something that has been raised that could in and of itself prove to be a problem in the long run is that there doesn't seem to be clear coordination even of these funds. So you'll have the provincial government talking about a pool of money that's going to be released to assist on certain things. Local municipalities are saying something else. National departments are saying something else. And all you're hearing is, you know, monies in the hundreds of millions of rands, billions of rand, and yet there's no clear path in terms of where this money is going to be flowing to.
Absolutely, I agree with you, and I do see that there is some silos when it comes to that. Already we've seen that in the national budget for 2022, there has been millions of rands that have been allocated through various grants. For example, the municipal grant, the education infrastructure grant, as well as the human settlement and development grant. They all have hundreds of millions that have been allocated for the relief of the floods that happened in 2019 and 2020. But like you're saying, there isn't quite effective communication and coordination of how these funds are going to be dispersed. And if it is there, then obviously it's not easily available to the public.
What are the biggest risks that somebody like yourself is identifying now, just even in the disbursement of funds? And we can start with something as basic as the delivery of water. There's a water crisis in many parts of KZN right now. And, you know, just 2 days ago, we had the Human Settlements Department go their water affairs and sanitation, and they've said they're going to be releasing at least 100 million, I believe it is. That's going to help with the distribution of water tankers to affected communities. But again, that's just an example of money that's going to be spent in the next week. How do we know where that money is flowing to? Are we getting real value for money, even in terms of the services that are going to be procured?
I think that it's a matter of urgency, and they should prioritize the access to water for the people, as this is their constitutional right. I also believe that we have a natural disaster at this stage. We don't need a health disaster coming out of it from the lack of water and the lack of effective sanitation. So I'd really think that the risks of the delay in the access to water would actually give us a health crisis on top of the natural crisis that we're facing.
When we look at the issue of deviations, particularly in terms of crisis in government departments and in supply chain management, how big of an issue is that, and where do we need to be looking, what do we need to be looking at rather in this moment to ensure that the necessary checks and balances are in place?
For example, if you see that despite the early warning systems that were issued out by the SA Weather Services, we find that there was a delay from the Department of Cooperative Governance that is in charge of disaster management. They only, spoke up on Tuesday evening about the state of disaster in KZN. So we need to make sure that from the time that there's effective early warning systems, they're actually implemented and the funds are accounted for and allocated effectively. And the best way to do this is to make that information publicly available. And then the Auditor General, the public as well, can hold the government to account for the money that has been dispersed, and as well as from the national, provincial, all the way to the local municipal level. If people have access to information and data on finances, they can track and trace how that money has been spent and used effectively.
Oh, Chrissy Dube, we're going to leave it there for this afternoon. She is with Good Governance South Africa. So I suppose it's really then up to members of society, opposition parties, to ensure that they put enough pressure to have all of these documents released publicly, that there's greater transparency even in the amount of funds that are going to be dispersed to help the situation in KZN. Well,